Teachers of Reddit, what differences do you see in students who have young parents vs students who have older parents? I would say that there is more correlation between which child is in my class. Oldest, only, middle, youngest. I teach kindergarten. Parents that are going through their first kid entering my class, kindergarten, have no idea what to expect and are pretty neurotic about very trivial and age appropriate things. Parents who have a second child going through the school system are always, "This isn't what it was like with my firstborn." And then there are the youngest ones. Parents are like, "Yeah, I figured. No, I'll just send money for you to take care of anything your class needs. Do I need to worry about? Good. I won't." Parents of only children are the wild cards. This is so accurate. I've even noticed this trend while babysitting. OMG, so with babysitting with the first child they're calling every hour. They've laid out 7 snacks and 4 activities. With the second and third they just toss them to you as they head out. None. Parent involvement is a big factor. If I email a parent, will they answer? Will they uphold consequences at home for behavior at school? Will they work with me to find solutions that work for their child? Those are where I see the differences. And in my experience, older parents are just as likely as younger parents to do those things. As a teacher, agree. It's not the age, it's the involvement. Yeah, my mom is pretty involved in my life, and I turned out fine. We live in a nice house in Alabama and are ready to have our first kid. As an older parent, it's strange when your kids' teachers are so young. My son's first grade teacher is almost 20 years younger than me. I guess you spend so long looking at teachers as older authority figures. It's weird for teachers too. At 41, I'm finally now the same age as most of my students' parents. I feel like they take me more seriously now. I started teaching high school when I was 23. The students were barely younger than me. FFS. There isn't a difference. I have seen great parents who are young and terrible older parents. As noted before, parent involvement and engagement makes all the difference. If parents read with their children, encourage them and actually have conversations with them, you notice a wider vocabulary, great literacy skills and more confidence. The difference after summer holidays is massive. Children who aren't read with regress massively and make spend a term getting them back to where they were before summer. I find the children whose parents don't listen to them are the ones who call out all the time and do anything for attention. Obviously there is exceptions such as medical conditions. That being said, some parents are involved, but in an unhealthy way. They question why their child isn't in the highest group, why they have moved up a level, and constantly talk about how their child is one of the best in the class. Sometimes unfortunately the child isn't quite living up to high expectations, and the anxiety this causes the children is crazy. I've seen children cry getting spelling wrong because their parent will flip out. I've also seen a parent make their child learn 2 groups worth of spelling because he would fall behind the higher group. It doesn't matter if the parents are young or old, have 1 child or 8, healthy engagement is key. I love parents who genuinely care, want to help their children, and listen to their children's interests. Well, if I'm being honest, there's not a lot of differences. Each person is different, so I can't just categorize them. I have one student who was moved to an advanced class by his older mother. Worst decision ever made by that mom, but she wanted to brag that her kid was taking advanced classes. Unfortunately, she doesn't really care that her son is struggling. It's really all about parent involvement. I've had a lot of moms talk to me about their kids' grades and how they're doing. But I've also had a lot of moms like the one I mentioned above. Any way to move the kid back down without ick now, flat out failing him out of the class? Or is he now forced to sink, fail, or swim, keep struggling? I'm adjusting the lesson to his level, but TBH, he's failing. It's kinda like putting a first grader in a fifth grader's class. It's hard to teach a kid if they can't even read the words you're teaching them. Difference between a parent who had a kid at 20 vs 35. Not a ton, except resources. The child of the older parent is more likely to be in more outside activities and have more money. Disclaimer to erase parents who drink a lot or do drugs from these statistics. Difference between a parent who had a kid at 16 vs 20? Huge. Honestly, except one. All the children of teen parents I've taught have significant behavior problems. As a parent who had a kid at 21, I'm glad to hear that kiddo isn't going to be set back. I taught for several years and many of my high school students had parents in their 30s, and you could pretty much guess which ones, based on their behavior. It was sad really, because often the 30-year-old mom was getting her shit together and beginning to thrive, as you do in your late 20s, but when she was 17 to 18 during the kid's formative years, she didn't have herself together, and that hindered her ability to get a kid set up for success in the world. This isn't always the case, of course, but it was pretty frequent where I was teaching. I've seen the good and bad in both. But sometimes the young parents aren't financially stable enough to raise kids. Also, they sometimes both work or have two jobs, so they aren't spending enough time with their kids, especially academically. I've found that some of the older parents put a lot of thought into having the child. It wasn't on a whim. Therefore, they tend to have the money, time, and also the desire to raise the child right, especially giving more time academically. But, on the minus side, I've seen older parents just not have the energy or patience to be around young children. I know a set of parents who are 52 and 65, with 3 very rambunctious boys between the ages of like 10 and 13. They are really stressed all the time. At their age, their kids should be long out of the house. But nope, they have many years left. That being said, I know of an older couple who had an accident baby recently, so it was on a whim rather than planned. I would imagine this isn't uncommon, since a lot of people think women stop being able to produce much earlier, like 30s, than they actually can. Try age 50. Thankfully for the kid, they are extremely wealthy and have time and are happy. I never learned the age of my students' parents when teaching, but once a music teacher that I had asked about the age of my parents and their professions. He was shocked to learn my father did not have a college degree, but thought it made sense that he was 60 plus when I was 16. He seemed to believe that having older parents with serious jobs meant the kids were wiser as well. I do believe I stood out from the other kids. I still remember being in 5th/6th grade and having adults laugh at me every now and then because they thought I had too much of an adult's vocabulary. It still could be just because I read too many books meant for people way older than me. I had that same experience too. Old dad and all. My dad was 46 when I was born. Not so old by today's standards, but in the '70s it was a bit odd. He really stood out. I think to the vocabulary was more so because I was an early reader and read a great deal. My dad and my mom were 46. I'm an only child and I think my mom had several miscarriages. A disadvantage I experienced was that they had no current knowledge of teens, i.e. how to deal with the opposite sex. Maybe their age intimidated my teachers. Little knowledge of popular music, current fashions. I did have a much broader knowledge base and a large home workshop to draw from than most of my peers. In my experience, age hasn't made a change in student behavior. More so the personality and parenting style of the parents makes a difference. Are they authoritarian, Authoritative or permissive parents? That will make a much bigger difference. Kids with authoritarian parents seem to have drastically less confidence and tend to have limited social skills. Kids with parents who are permissive also stand out because they often are the kids with little self-control and parent involvement. The parents who are involved and you can tell really care tend to be easier to work with, and you can see it in their children.